at the very top of the show, the meeting between delegations from Russia and Ukraine are currently underway. Finally, after a lot of prodding by the entire world, Russia and Ukraine both agreed that they will attend a meeting, that delegations will talk at the border that Russia shares with Belarus. And remember, this is happening in the shadow of Russia saying yesterday that we are activating our nuclear deterrence system, which is a euphemism for we are ready to activate our nukes. What is going to be the way forward? Is there even a ceasefire possible? Ukraine is saying Russia has to first withdraw all its troops. Russia is saying we are willing to make concessions, but we are not willing to give up on territory. Listen in to what was said before the beginning of talks.
Уважаемые друзья, президент Беларуси просил встретить вас, приветствовать и обеспечить максимально вашу работу. Как было договорено с президентами Зеленским и Путиным, вы можете чувствовать себя в полной безопасности, это наша святая обязанность. Президент Лукашенко искренне надеется, что сегодня, в ходе сегодняшних переговоров, удастся найти пути решения всех кризисных вопросов. И все белорусы молятся за это. Любые ваши просьбы и предложения, касающиеся организации сегодняшней встречи, будут приняты и беспрекословно исполнены. Ждем результата.
All right, now Russia has warned the West against taking any action. Remember, today in the evening, India time, a critical meeting of the UNGA has been called. An emergency meeting of the UN General Assembly has been called. Only 3 countries abstained from that vote, which took place earlier in the day at the UNSC to call for this meeting. Even as they sit at the talks table, both Russia and Ukraine continue to play mind games with each other, both of them addressing the troops of each other's country saying, lay down arms or be ready to die.
Поставки оружия, вооружения, боеприпасов на территорию Украины, с нашей точки зрения, может и станет чрезвычайно опасным и дестабилизирующим фактором, который в любом случае никоим образом не будет способствовать ни стабильности на Украине, ни восстановлению порядка, ничему, а в долгосрочной перспективе может иметь гораздо более опасные последствия.
All right, let me again bring in Sushant Sareen and Colonel DPK Pillai. Colonel Pillai, what can we expect from today's talks? Or is this only tokenism?
This is just tokenism. I don't think that they can find a meeting ground here. The issue entirely rests on the fact that Peru carried out its eastward expansion, which was against Russian security interests. If you see the map of its expansion from 1991 and the founding agreement, it was an agreement which was breached in many parts, by including former Soviet Union territories. So just by having a peace talk, there's no way Russia is going to pull out of those territories that it has occupied until its terms are clearly met. So, and you know, we are kind of so used to Western leaders and interlocutors preaching to us on the subcontinent and other regions of the world about talking of restraint and other things. And here you find in the heart of Europe, you know, that you find this Anglo-Saxon white Slavic races fighting, bombing each other, and you know, the greatest violence. India and Pakistan has shown greater restraint in all its localizing. Now you have the Belarusians going to referendum today, shortly, to decide whether they can get the nuclear missile on it. The NATO has ordered its...
Okay, sir, I'm sorry to interrupt you, because now we're just getting in news from Russian media. Ukraine, they say, has named key points for talks with Russia. They have said, we will not give anything or give in on anything until there is immediate ceasefire and withdrawal of troops by Russia. Sushant Sareen, ceasefire, withdrawal of troops, this even as we had images today of shelling taking place and man-to-man fighting taking place in Kyiv and Kharkiv.
Exactly, but look, let's face it, I don't think anybody realistic really expected any solution to come out of these talks. These talks are welcome as it is, But I think the demands which the Russians are making of the Ukrainians, I don't think any self-respecting Ukrainian, unless he was a quisling, would ever concede those demands, especially not under these circumstances. And to expect that the Russians, as Colonel Pillai said, would agree to a ceasefire and agree to withdraw their troops, it would be a huge setback for Mr. Putin. I think Mr. Putin is right now more interested in protecting himself than he is in protecting Russia's interests, because frankly, I don't see how he is protecting Russia's interests by, by doing things which have put the Russian economy in a complete meltdown. I don't see how he is protecting Russia's interests by getting his country completely isolated in the world. I don't see how he is protecting Russia's interests by threatening a nuclear holocaust on the world, because that is what he is doing. If he was winning this war,
yes,
if his troops are achieving what they had set out to do, I don't see any sensible person threatening nuclear exchange. But the moment you start threatening a nuclear exchange, it means either you are losing or you are deranged. This is what Pakistanis do. This is what Sheikh Rashid does. Now, if Mr. Putin has reduced himself to Mr. Sheikh Rashid's level, then what does one say?
So let me just ask the basic question that everyone on the streets is asking. How long will this last, Colonel Pillai? How long?
See, Sushant just covered it very well. Russia has not agreed, has placed unreasonable demands, whether it's Ukraine or Russia or the West. This will, and it's also a question of survival of Putin, and the Russians are quite capable of prolonged warfare. They've seen that in the world wars, and you've seen it earlier also. So in terms of their ability, resources and capabilities, they are capable of sustaining greater losses. You've seen that happening in Stalingrad in the World War II. And so as far as the depth and the ability of Russia to withstand any kind of pressure is there, I think the reason why he had invoked the nuclear threat would more be on to kind of advise the NATO forces to stay away from intervening here. And the fact that they were kind of coalescing there. So he needed to put in a very clear and potent threat of using the nuclears, because that is the only way he could actually stop the advance of NATO countries. I think the best thing would be if both the countries, Ukraine and Russia, decide what is good for them without external interference. And I think Russia, Americans, and the NATO forces and European leaders would actually best leave Ukraine and Russia to deal with each other rather than meddle on each other's behalf.
Okay, so essentially left to themselves, there's a greater likelihood that they reach some kind of understanding, but this is not going to draw down in a hurry. I want you to take a quick look of a map of Ukraine right now, just to give you an idea of where the most fierce fighting is taking place. So this is the eastern border of Ukraine, and it is cities here which see the maximum violence, the maximum fight taking place. So here are Luhansk and Kharkiv. Kharkiv, there is still fierce fighting that is happening. Most of these places, Russia is saying that we are in control. Chernihiv is also where they are saying that we have taken over. Kyiv, Ukraine is saying, is still left standing. And this, the western border, is where India is telling its citizens, please come to this place. It is much safer. I'm being told that Shri Ravi Shankar is also joining us. Across the world, there are calls being given for peace to be brought back. Any mediation that is required, anyone in the international community needs to step in. That people are volunteering to be those mediators. There have been several conflicts, Sushant Sareen, which have gone on, in fact, for years, where there has been a standoff. Do you see a situation like that we could see this stretching into several months, if not years?
Padmaja, let me just take you back for a second to 2014. I think the mistake which Mr. Putin made was that when in 2014 he entered Crimea, I think it was a one-day operation. I don't even think a shot was fired. They just went in, took it over, and confronted the world with the fait accompli. Compare that to what is happening now and the fight back from the Ukrainian side. Now, the thing is that there could be cities, including Kyiv, which might fall to the invading forces. But the thing to watch out for is what is the resistance which the Ukrainians continue to offer, how much assistance do they get from the Western world, which clearly the Western world is now willing to give them the assistance now that the Ukrainians are showing that, they're going to dig in their heels and stand up to the Russians. So this then becomes a really complicated situation for Mr. Putin, because how much of his army is he going to push into Ukraine? How much of it is he going to push it? Is he going to pulverize those cities? And what is going to be the impact of that? Look, it's not just about the war and, you impose a war and then you go back. It is about what is the political endgame of the war. And do you think after massacring hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians, which he might have to do to actually establish his control, he will have Ukrainians amenable enough to listen to him and demilitarize and become a satellite state? And not only that, if supposing he puts his army in, what about an insurgency? What about the Ukrainians fighting back? What about irregular warfare? What about Ukraine becoming a quagmire for the Russians? So I wonder, and all this at a time when the Russian economy would have melted down, because nobody would be ready to do business with it, or at least a bulk of the world would not do any business with them. So I don't know whether they have thought this thing through.
So did Putin actually overplay his hand, not expect the kind of resistance that the Ukrainians have put up against his advancing forces? Kyiv hasn't fallen. They are being sent to the table for talks. The UNGA emergency meeting today evening is going to be critical. What is the world going to do other than offer platitudes? Are they just going to stand by and watch a country threaten nuclear warfare? Thank you very much, Colonel Pillai, Sushant Sareen, for joining us. I'm taking a very quick break. On the other side, the head of Sri Sri, the head